To the ETF Inspector. It's Wednesday, August 27th, 5:30 in the afternoon, and this is our daily recap video for our YieldMax weekly paying dividend funds, ULTY, the Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund, and SLTY, the new Ultra Short Option Income Strategy Fund. As always, I'm on X at ETF_Inspector1. Follow along. I'll let you know when videos are premiering, do some shout outs. I'll talk about that in a second. Let you know about trades and reposting distribution announcements, all things related to these ETFs that we talk about. So before I get started, I like to do the shout outs and the thank yous because that is very important to me to recognize people and say the thank yous publicly. So New York Trader 1, we had a super chat going wild over in the yesterday's video. New York Trader 1 came in with a $4.99 super chat, said thanks buddy, thank you very much New York Trader. Then Bob came in with $2, didn't even have anything to say unless okay, no, I don't, it might have like gone away, but either way gave $2 and that was thank you. And then Gavin H, he's given here before. Bob has two before. And Gavin did 582. I know he said something. There it is. One ulti on me. So thank you to you guys. And then right while I was doing the prep work, another thing came in. I got a notification from Buy Me a Coffee. Little blurb there that explains how things work. And ETF Andy said, love the Roundhill and Ulti videos. Your videos are my new nightly routine. I know it takes a lot of work. Much appreciated. So ETF Andy, thank you very much. I don't know. It doesn't show it anywhere on either of these, but Andy gave $25. So very generous of you. Very generous of everyone. Nothing is expected. So I'm very thankful for all of it. So let's go ahead and get into everything that we're here to talk about. All things Ulti and Salty. So we'll start off. Ulti was down slightly during the day, 576. Touched 575 or as high as 581. Not a whole lot of movement as we go through. There's a decent mixture, but it looks like maybe a little bit more red than green. We'll go into the specifics on our spreadsheets. When we scroll down, we got to get past all the other funds we cover and get to Salty. Salty was down a decent amount, almost 1%. And it was pretty much all MongoDB's fault, up almost 38%. Now, a lot of the funds were up, so that's going to hurt in a short fund. But MongoDB had most to do with it. So, again, we will get into it. We go to YieldMax's page. Now for the holdings, you got to go to each individual fund and scroll down and click to download the holdings. But for the intraday trades, this is pretty nice. You click on the intraday trades and you get all the trades for everything they've got all on one CSV, I believe it comes up as. Luckily, I can copy and paste them into Excel without any errors. So I did that. And that's how we get our information on our spreadsheet. Now, right before we get into that, I do want to point out that it was Declaration Day, so we've got all our weeklies announced theirs. Big surprise, Ulti wins annual yield-wise 85%, and then all our monthlies are actually every 4 weeks. Group D, SIMC wins that one coming in. It was 102% when they announced it. Obviously, SIMC went up a little bit today, which would drop that annual yield. Now, if you want to see the breakdown of all of those things, including return of capital, everything like that, I have been trying to start making a Wednesday declaration video. So that came out this morning. It's nice and short and sweet, 10 minutes. I think I messed myself up there for the algorithm. I think anything 10 minutes and over works better for YouTube. And when I hit the pause button, as you see, or the stop button, it was 9:59. So I think hopefully that 1 second doesn't kill me. But so that video with all the breakdown for those, the whole point of that was to make these videos shorter. I'm trying not to add anything extra in. But we will look at Ultis since we are specifically talking about them. We said they made over 20 cents a share in options income last week. IV was putting it closer to 8. Obviously, we've talked about it. The IV formula is not perfect, so it's always going to be a little higher than that. and my guess was 10.5 cents, and they chose to rip the band-aid off and break that 10-cent streak, dropping it down to 9.5 cents. So that was a surprise. Oops. That was about 10% below my guesstimate. So my guesstimate was saying a 95%. They ended up paying about 85%. All right, when we take a look at the trades today, they sold shares of AST Space Mobile, Oklo, and IonQ. They didn't sell out of anything. They just trimming a little bit of the positions, 15 million, 10 million, and 10 million. And then they put that money into SMCI, Supermicro Computer Inc., buying 700,000 shares, $31 million. All right, the trades was actually fairly small today, so we can get through this. Right off the bat, AST Space Mobile, just closing out the options associated with the shares that were sold. You notice 312,400 shares. There's 100 shares per contract, so just drop the 2 zeros, 3,124 contracts. So it wasn't a close and roll or anything. This is just closing those out. So generally that's going to cost money unless the stock dropped. So $43,000 debit or cost to close them out. Bitmine Immersion Technology, this is a close and roll, and it's Wednesday, so now this is kind of that make or break point where they decide if there's enough time value left to roll to still this Friday or next, and they chose to roll to next Friday, dropping the strike price from 54 down to 51, dropping the puts from 48 to 43, and if you'll notice, those puts brought in a decent amount of money when we closed them out. We sold them for $2 a share, or $1.9 million, resulting altogether in the close and roll of $2.3 million. Now I know, when I talk to people in these videos, I kind of assume people know more than I do about this, and I'm just relaying information. But we've had lots of questions about what is roll or how do you roll. So roll is just a fancy way of saying closing out your options and reselling them for the next week. Some brokers let you actually literally click a button that says roll, and it pre-fills all the categories with the closings and the openings. But you can do it yourself too, just by buying to close things that you sold and selling to open for the following expiration date. So $2.3 million collected on that. Credo Technology, closing and rolling. So here we see it staying within the same week. But had to raise the strike price by $10. So that's going to cost you every time. We raised our puts by $8. So obviously, if the stock went up and we had to raise our sold calls or our short call strike, then our puts aren't going to be worth a whole lot. That cost us $1.4 million. IonQ was up big today, so they closed and rolled these. What were they? 38.50s. Took them up to 43.50s for next week. Then they closed out some 43. Then they closed out a portion of these. 25.55. That goes right along with the sold shares. So they sold the shares after they had closed and rolled, so then they turned around and had to close again. Let's see if it worked out in their favor. It did not. So they sold them for $1.15. Then they had to buy to close a portion of them for $1.40. So that wasn't great. And then all in all, that resulted in almost $5.5 million debit or cost. Next, we've got Reddit closing and rolling to next week as well, taking it from $230 sold calls to $220. So we're going out a week and dropping the strikes. That should bring in money, and it did, $1.5 million. Rocket Lab, here's another close and roll to next week, dropping the strike price, rolling it out a week, resulting in $2.3 million. Let's see, our purchased puts are obviously when we're dropping the strike, it means the stock went down. Same thing with Reddit. So as you can see, when we sold the puts, we actually collected more for them than we had to pay to close out the calls. So that's nice, basically bringing in money to pay for that. So same thing here. Buying to close these calls in Rocket Lab came out to, what's that, about $540,000. whereas selling the puts was over $1 million collected, and then collected another almost $3 million. But purchasing a little bit of more insurance, more puts, all in all resulted in a $2.3 million credit. SMCI, I believe we closed some calls the other day and then never resold them. Maybe not. No. New shares here, SMCI, that we purchased. So what we did was sold our call and bought our put, our typical collar strategy, but then we also sold a put further out of the money, 37 as opposed to the $40 protective put. So that helped pay for a portion of the insurance policy. So resulted in a $448,000 collected. And finally, we just closed out 5,180 contracts of SMR puts that we had sold. So that cost us $20,000. So if we were buying sold puts, then we were unlocking the rest of the protection, meaning it's not limited on those 5,180 contracts. So all in all, that resulted in a $364,000 debit or loss, money going out as opposed to coming in on the options trading. As you can see, we're going to be down in market value. So let's take a look at how and why. Let me take a drink. Starting off with the firm holdings, down almost 0.5%. Calls for this week at 83 and 86 are about 7 and almost 11% out of the money. App Lovin down 1.3%. Still not enough to get these 455s and 457.50s back out of the money. They're in by 1.1 and 1.7%. They also have 480s sold. I'm talking about calls here. 3.69% out of the money. AST Space Mobile down 4.3%. They've got 50s, 52s, and 53s all sold for this Friday. 3.6, 7.7, and 9.8% out of the money. Bitmine Immersion, the big loser today, down 7.85%. They closed and rolled the further out of the money positions. They still have 5150s in play for Friday that are 11.8% out of the money. That decrease dropped the value of the fund by $7.8 million. Webull down 3.7%. They have calls sold at $15, $15.50, and $16, all expiring Friday. 3.8, 7.3, and 10.8% out of the money. Coinbase up 0.16%. $315 calls expiring Friday are just about 2% out of the money. Credo Technology was up 2%. They closed and rolled the remaining options that were still in play for this week, and they have September 19th 120s that are in play, already 2.2% in the money. CoreWeave, the big winner, up over 6% today, bringing in a value increase of $5.8 million. That did take their $93 calls into the money by 4%, and their 98s are still 1% out of the money. No action was taken as far as closing and rolling anything. Roughly $183 million in government obligation funds. We'll talk at the same time with the cash, negative $21 million cash. So what's that? 162 roughly that's available to be used. Galaxy Digital down 1.25%. You got your collar strategy, and then also some sold puts. So it's a little bit tricky, but the sold calls are 4.5% out of the money. The sold puts are 2.4% in the money. Really kind of need that to narrow into that above 25 and below 25.50 range. Robinhood markets down 5.4%. They've got 111s and 112s sold for this week, 7.8 and 8.8% out of the money. IonQ up 1.6%. They closed and rolled the positions, the calls and their associated protective puts that were in the money. They still have 4150s that are out of the money by 0.2%. Marvell Technology. Actually, let's take a quick. I like to look. IonQ ended at 41.41. When they sold them, they got 42.31. So they did pick a good point in the day to sell those. Got a little extra. Let's see, AST Space Mobile. They sold for 48.96. It closed at 48.25. So right now they're 2 for 2 on beating the closing price of the day, which actually means they realized a greater increase than what we're showing. Marvell Technology up 0.7%. 78 sold for Friday are 4.2% out of the money. Nebius Group down about 0.5%. They have 69s and 71s sold for Friday, 1.5% in the money and 1.25% out of the money. Oklo, here's another one. They sold some of these shares. Let's take a look back and forth. 73.22 is where it ended. They sold them for 73.33. So again, beat the closing price, but not by much on that one. They've got 71s and 73s calls that are sold that are still in the money, 3 and 0.3%. They also have 74s and 79s sold that are out of the money, 1 and almost 8%. Palantir down over 2.5% today. That brought these 157.50s and 160s back out of the money, along with the 162.50s and 165s. All in all, 0.5%, 2%, 3.6%, and 5.2% out of the money. Reddit down 3.8%. They closed and rolled the collar strategy that was further out of the money. They still have 1,000 contracts at 225 that are 6.6% out of the money. Rigetti up a little over 0.5%. They have 15.50 calls sold. That's $15.50 and $16. They're 0.7 and just about 4% out of the money. Rocket Lab was down 3.9%. That brought these 47s back out of the money by 1.62%. They also have 49.50s that are 7% out of the money. The rest were closed and rolled since they were so far out of the money. And so again, right, so that's why it was cheaper to pay to close out these calls, and they received more because these puts associated with them were closer to the money. SMCI up 0.9%, taking their 44.50s into the money by 0.5%. That was the one they bought. So let's see if they bought at a better price than closing. 44.76. They paid 44.54. So they were 4 for 4 as far as buying or selling at a better price than things closed at. NewScale Power down almost 2.5%. That brought these 35.50s back out of the money by 1%. They also have 37s calls sold that are 5.3% out of the money. And then they sold puts. It is generating income. It's realistically just to help pay for the protective puts. But the flip side of that is it takes away the full downside protection. So right now it's looking like a great play because they're 17.5% out of the money. So it's looking like it was kind of just free money to help pay for the protective puts. Tesla down over 0.5%. $355 calls expiring Friday are 1.5% out of the money. Unity Software up 0.2%. 38s are 5.7% in the money. They also have 41.50s that are 2.8% out of the money. Next, we've got I believe it was a calendar spread on Ulta Beauty, right? As you notice, there's no gray line here, but when we switch from Unity Software to Ulta Beauty, it's because we are just trading an option on it without owning any shares. So I don't think they have a high conviction on these as being a upward mover, right? They didn't buy the shares, but they think they can make some money on a quick option play. So they sold 527.50 calls for this week, and they bought the calls for next week. Stock went up today, I believe. We don't track it because it's not changing our value of our fund based on the outstanding shares, but I don't even remember if I remembered to look it up. Yep, it was up 1.5% today. So we're just going to wait and see, and we will report on how this strategy works out. Upstart up 1% today, just over. They've got $72 calls expiring Friday, 3.45% out of the money. So all in all, ups and downs resulted in a decrease in value of $37.8 million. We've got Ulti closing around 576. Net assets, or assets under management, $3.1 billion. Yesterday, people jumping back in. They saw enough 2 green days in a row, and they were back to in love with it. There were 2.8 million more shares purchased, bringing us up to 548,400,000 outstanding shares. Our NAV at the start of the day was 578. We took a little hit, so that's why we dropped down to 576. All right, next we're going to go over to Salty. We'll get through that much quicker. There's half as many funds and even less trades. So off the bat, if you noticed on the thumbnail, we added Circle Internet Group and we got rid of MongoDB. So they sold shares, right? We start out, instead of buying shares, we start out by selling shares. So we're going to have negative 1,500 shares of Circle Internet Group now. So this is interesting. They don't have Circle in ULTY, but they do have them in LFGY. Now, ULTY, they specifically are high vol stocks that they have a good feeling that they're going up. LFGY is let's just trade options on crypto big names. So, I would assume they have to still feel that they're going up, but then that's kind of going against putting them in Salty. MongoDB, they went up 38%. So that was a rough one. I believe they beat it again, so let's take a quick look. 281.95 is where they bought to close, and it ended at 295. So they saved themselves another almost $14 a share by buying them when they did instead of waiting till the end of the day. But with selling shares of Circle Internet Group, they're going to start their reverse collar strategy. So this is where they sell puts to generate income and then buy calls as upside protection, because if a stock goes up after you sold it, it's going to be more expensive to buy it to close. And I just noticed that I forgot to total these up. But we can do that just as quick as we're going. $2,900 collected on that new reverse collar strategy to go with the new shares. Next is GitLab. They closed and rolled out to next week, so it resulted in $7,200 credit or profit. Let's see, we bought to close our 42s and we sold 44s for next week. But this is backwards, right? Because we're talking about puts, so that's kind of like dropping the strike price. Over on Ulti's side, it's bringing the strike closer to where the share price currently is. MongoDB, this one, it hurt buying to close them out, but then when we close this out, the sold puts are going to be real nice and cheap to close out, and the purchased calls are going to be nice and valuable. So we did get 79,000 back. Doesn't really help when you lose 535,000. And we didn't lose 535. We paid 535,000. Since the fund is so new, we actually can quickly go back and take a look at what we paid for MongoDB. We started out with 1,100 shares that we collected $234,000 on. Did we do more? Sold some 800 more for another 175. So that's 3-4. That's over 400,000. Collecting another 2,700 there. Another 5,000 there. Another 80,000 on the closeout. So that 535,000, really like $100,000 loss, if my quick math worked out well. All right, and then finally RH closing and rolling to next week as well resulted in a profit of $4,700. So, all right, let's hide these again so we don't have so far to scroll. And see that resulted in a $249,000 negative or loss cash flow going out on the option trading day. As you can see, we're also going to be down for the holdings. That's because more things went up than down, and then especially Mongo going up so much. We did see an increase in money yesterday, 500,000 shares of United States Treasury bills for July 9th of next year, and then 500,000 more for August 6th. So basically $1 million getting put in here. Then we got Astera, A-Lab, up 0.36% today. We got our sold puts 6.5% out of the money. We sold some calls to help pay for the protective calls. They're 11% out of the money. Abercrombie and Fitch down 1.3%. That's going to make our value go up because we sold them. So when they go down, that helps us. When they go up, it hurts us. $93 puts are 2.6% out of the money still. Applied Digital up 1.4, so that's going to drop our value. Our puts are 7% out of the money. Whoa, what happened? Bloom Energy. Why does it keep doing this? Bloom Energy up 1.7%. Our puts at 46.50 are 8.5% out of the money. Bill Holdings up 2.3%. Our $39.50 puts are 5% out of the money. CrowdStrike up 1.2%. Puts at 405 are still 4% out of the money. Instead of selling another call to help pay for the protection, they buy another put, in this case further out of the money, to limit the amount we could have to spend to close it out. So that's why there's that extra option position there. Dell Technology up 1.1% today. 125 puts expiring Friday are 5.6% out of the money. Enphase Energy down 1%, so that increases our value. $36.50 puts are 2.8% out of the money. There's over $4 million sitting in government obligation funds to go along with the almost $1 million in treasuries. And we scroll down, cash, we got $6.6 million. GitLab up 8%, so that one hurts. We closed and rolled those. It hurts our value, but it makes us made our puts real nice and cheap to close out. Lululemon up 1.5%. Puts for this Friday at 197.50 are almost 4% out of the money. Mara Holdings up a fraction, 0.06. What's that? 1 penny. 15.50 puts are 2.2% out of the money. MongoDB was the big winner today as far as a stock going up. It's not a winner for us. It hurt a lot. That increase in value resulted in a $154,000 decrease in our value because it made these sold shares more expensive to buy back. We closed out all the options. Strategy was the biggest loser or decreaser on the day, so that increased our value. They went down 2.65%. It did take our puts, our short puts, into the money just barely by 44 cents on a $342 stock. And finally, RH up 3%. So we closed and rolled these 10 options here that we had 5.6%. It is kind of odd that we're closing the ones that were closer to the money rather than further out of the money, but who knows. And I shouldn't have said last but not least because I forgot we also have that calendar spread just in reverse over here on Ulta Beauty. So where they sold a call and bought a call in ULTY at the exact same strike prices, they sold a put and bought a put over here in SLTY. So we'll see how that goes. For now, the sold put is 1.1% out of the money after today's change. So that resulted in, it changed, so I'll edit it, $216,000 decrease in value. Assets under management when the day started, 6.1 million, 125,000 outstanding shares, had our NAV at 49.41. Obviously, it dropped as everything went against them today. Not everything, but most things. All right, that's everything for the video. Time to wrap it up. I got a dad joke for you. But before I do, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the likes, comments, shares, feedback, and support. And Darren said last joke was getting a little sad. I can't remember his exact words, so I got like I feel like I've used this one before, but just in case, I got to back up. But so, all right, dad joke of the day. I don't want to brag about my finances or anything, but my bank calls me almost every day to tell me that my balance is outstanding. And then that reminds me of the time I got fired from the bank when an old lady came in and asked me to check her balance. Boy, she ended up on the floor. The manager was mad at me. All right, have a good night, and catch you in the next video.